Hello, my friends. Hello, hello. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you for hanging out. My name is Jason, and this is the Outstanding Life Show. Here, if you're new here, let me know. Welcome, welcome. If you've been here before, this show is about. We talk about mental health. We talk about recovery. We talk about mindfulness, and we take a different approach from it. We take an approach where our hope is to expand the vocabulary and expand the conversation, and to help remove some of the stigma, some of the negativity, if you will. Where, touching on today's topic, just to get ahead a little bit, where there's a certain amount of shame that can come from admitting that there's a problem, or there's a little bit of a shame from pride, where we have we dip into ego a little bit later on in today's show, but the precursor to any of this can be shame, and it's the fear of shame. It's the feeling of shame. We remember the last time we felt shameful. There's even a TV show right now called Shame. But there's the idea of shame is wide and vast, very similar to recovery, very similar to addiction. There's no two ideas the same. I almost wanted to say there's no, it's the same solution for you is not the same solution for me. We talked about that in yesterday's episode about stress and stressors. The same stress for you is not the same stress for me. Although when it comes to shame, there can be very similar things where what is shameful for you can very well be either the same understanding, or it can have the same impact. But there's when it comes to shame, when it comes to that feeling, I saw this talk it was on YouTube. It was Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you know him, but he's very, I almost want to call him analytical in his approach and view to things. His book, The 12 Principles of Life, or the 12 Steps. Very, in recovery we have the 12-step program, and his ideas of the 12 rules of life, I think is what it's called. But in his video, he made a YouTube video, and it was about fear. And his analogy that he gave was, imagine you're approaching a cliff. You're walking up to a cliff, where your car is approaching a cliff. And as you approach that cliff, it's not the cliff that scares you. What scares you and what shakes you on the inside is the fear of what happens when you get to that cliff, and what's going to happen if you fall. And the anxiety and the anxiousness that kicks in doesn't kick in after you fall. It's what happens before you fall. And it's the 10 seconds approaching that fall. That's the anxiety. That's the fear. And when it comes to shame, once we feel that shame, once we've been in it, reveled in it, and once it owns you and there's no escape, and you're surrounded by like this blanket of I almost want to call it of shame, like a blanket of fear and anxiety. Once we have this surrounding us, wrapping its arms around us, once you've felt it and you've become one with your shame, for lack of a better word, you don't forget that feeling. You don't forget it. It's not something you can just shake off in a shower kind of thing. Like these feelings of shame take deep roots, and it holds on to you. And I don't know if you can relate, where that heavy emotion, that heavy circumstance, you hit that event crisis point, and there's no going back. There's points in my life where my world was expanded to a third dimension, where the 2.0 operating software that I thought I needed was outdated with the 3.0 operating software, and feelings, deep feelings like fear, anxiety, and shame can move you. It can hold on to you. There's almost like you keep going back to it. And there's times in my life where I would relive the same moment over and over again. And these wouldn't be happy feelings. These wouldn't be joyous, abundant emotions of resilience and celebration. Some of these feelings I would relive over and over again were like the worst parts of my life, like a train wreck or like a car crash. It slows down and you replay it over and over and over in your head. And the damage that comes from that doesn't come from the event. The damage comes from replaying it over and over. And I've learned this now. I've learned this through counseling, through one-on-one coaching, through group therapy, through going to meetings, that these ideas that I have are not unique to me, and that there are individual characteristics that everybody can associate with. But so when I say the same shameful moments for you may not be the same shameful moments for me, there's certain things we can relate to. There's certain things we've all been through. Certain things where there's the rejection. That's somebody rejects you, or somebody doesn't hire you, or you express interest and it falls apart, or you lose the job, you lose the girl, you lose the guy or the cat, or like whatever it is. So there's those feelings of shame, there's those feelings of rejection. That's common. It's almost like a base that exists consistently. But how we deal with it and how we manage it can be unique to us, and how we process that is unique to us. And I think when it comes to those anxiety moments, when it comes to those fearful pheromones that kick in before the stress actually happens, those pheromones can live in us, and they almost, I don't want to say they become imbued, but they almost have like their own life, where it becomes a part of our life. Just the thought of that feeling creates these pheromones, and then pretty soon those fearful pheromones are making decisions for me. Those acts of shame that we experience, and then we almost create these fearful, shameful pheromones where they're now part of our life, where they're starting making decisions, where if you put your hand on a stove and you burn your hand, you learn to not put your hand on stoves. That's the very rudimentary way to look at things. If I apply that same mindset to fear, anxiety, frustration, resentment, negativity, and shame, pretty soon I'm going to assume and reduce my life down to, if I open up to somebody, that's going to equate to me being hurt. So what I should not do then is open up to anybody. That's not healthy or helpful. That's not going to bridge that sense of fulfillment. That's not going to bring me joy, and that's not going to expand my world to a third dimension. If anything, that's going to keep me at a I almost want to call it a simmer, where it's like it's a pot of boiling water, where if I'm never boiling, if I'm just simmering, I'm never going to reach that point that I'm aiming for. I'm never going to get to that, what I'm reaching for. I'm always going to have that sense of, I almost want to call it lack. So there's the fearful pheromones, there's the fearful shame. And once we've had that taste of shame, and you never want to go back to it, the hard part is what's created, in that gap, in that space. What is fostered and grown when I replay it over and over in my head. As I'm fostering it, I'm giving it more time, I'm giving it more energy, I'm burning lean fuel into the night, focusing on something that's not helping me, that's not serving other people, it's not serving the greater good. I heard this other talk with Deepak Chopra, and he was talking about, because he's a medical doctor, and he shared this. There was a research done, I think it was in Germany, where they took these mice, and they were in a room, and they gave them electrical shocks, and the mice were then they weren't killed or anything, but they were electrically shocked, and they took those mice out of the room, and then as soon as they brought in new mice into the room, those mice smelled the pheromones from the previous mice, and immediately their hearts became elevated. They didn't know what was going to happen, but they immediately started to become anxious. They immediately became filled, I don't want to say filled with anxiety, that's not the right word. How do you measure that in a mouse? But those fearful pheromones can have a physical impact, not just on us, but on other people. So when I'm surrounding myself with, we've talked previously about having the benefits of a supportive community, having a counselor, having a peer support group, or having I almost want to call it an A team, where it's someone you can go to when you know you need help. Someone you can rely on, someone you can get advice from, or just to bend an ear and to let them know what your thoughts are and what you're feeling. If I've surrounded myself with Here's a poor example where if my supporting community that I've surrounded myself with are people who, if I wouldn't go to them for advice, then why would I start accepting their opinion? Or if we're all couch potatoes, I'm trying to say this nicely, and none of us have that gumption or desire or passion to pursue a life other than couch potatoing. Is that a word? Couch potatoing? Where if all I'm ever doing is reducing my desires and aspirations to being a couch potato, and I reach out to another person who's a couch potato, what advice am I going to get from them? What motivations are they going to spark and desire? And so here's where having a supportive community can be huge. And we talked about that in a previous episode. And if you didn't catch it, I highly encourage you to go and check it out. But if I'm experiencing those fearful pheromones, those shameful emotions, and I'm not sure, and I go the second sober thought and I reach out to somebody, and that person is not of that same gumption or desire, the support I might receive might not be supportive. And so there's that key balance we talked about before, about having one of these things isn't going to solve everything. Having a supportive community by itself, I don't want to call it enough, but if all I'm ever doing is just working the 12 steps, but I'm not getting the support from a community, or if I'm getting the support from the community, but I'm not dealing with stress. If I'm not dealing with stress, I'm also not dealing with my hungry, angry, lonely, and tired acronym we talked about before. So having all of these things in checks and balances can be huge and beneficial. But so too is identifying that these emotions we feel, these fearful pheromones, these shameful moments, I don't want to call them they're not going away. But if I can set up an environment that encourages support, if I can set up an environment where I know I can rely on these three people, if one person's not going to answer, I can reach out to option 2 or 3, and that's guaranteed 90% of them are going to answer. If I can ensure that I'm looking after my hungry, angry, lonely, and tired, and that reduces my active feeling stressors. If I can look after reaching out to my friends and family to make, to recharge my batteries and ensure I'm having that emotional connection, that reduces my chance of anxiety. Or if I'm getting my exercise, meal prepping, planning, these are all things that can help mitigate. They by themselves are not solving anything. And when it comes to having those moments where we are feeling weak, when we are having moments where we're feeling challenged, upset, when we do have those lonely points, when we are at that moment where we're left with nothing else but that blanket of shame, and when we're left with nothing else but replaying that in our head, we've got these other measures in place to help remove a lot of the other anxieties, so that when those time comes, I'm able to consciously manage it. And I don't want to say like deal with it, where I just change my thoughts. I heard this example once where, Jason, I can be positive that I'm broke, but that doesn't change the act that I'm actually still broke. And I can empathize where they're coming from, and I can appreciate that standpoint, where if I'm feeling that moment of shame, if I'm replaying things in my head, I could keep replaying it. And that's what I used to do. And admittedly, that's how I battled myself over and over and over again, where I beat myself up for making those choices, or you lost the job, the girl, the cat, whatever that was. So in those moments, if I continue to habitually replay things in my head, if I'm reliving that act of that shameful moment, yes, those shameful moments happened, but I'm also in a position now where I can reframe things, I can relabel them, I can give a new meaning and a new lesson from those moments. If I was somebody that, just as an example, if I was somebody that had never felt those lows, and if we talked previously about having the rock bottom experience, where if I'm somebody that's never hit that rock bottom, would I ever know what rock bottom is or means or feels like? It's hard to perceive if you've never hit that point. Once you reach that point, once you felt that shame, once you've been in those boots, you felt those shoes, I'm now in a place of power where I'm now able to carve a new fate. I'm able to choose new circumstances. I can surround myself with a much more supportive community. I can have a stronger connection to my friends and family. I can build new habits. I can put these safety measures in place. I can put these challenge gaps where if things are working too good, I've ensured that I'm still going to get my support that I need. In the old days, in Jason of the past, where I would, if things were too good, I would go out and celebrate. If things were really bad, guess what? I would still go out and celebrate in the exact same manner. I would be at the bar surrounded by friends who were of the same mindset. And it really didn't support me. It didn't support the long-term version of me. I was not in a positive mental health state, and I wasn't looking after myself. I wasn't looking after other people. And no wonder no wonder I was going through strings of bad choices, of bad relationships, of horrible jobs, and it was never my fault. And these are things where my ego was making the decisions. That fear and that pride were making decisions. That blanket of shame was getting in the way. I was holding on to it for so long that it became a habit. It became something that was a part of me. Like what is it, Linus in the Peanuts? You ever see that? Where Linus has his blanket with him all the time? What if that was shame? What if that was anxiety? What if that was just synonymous with who we identified ourselves as? That's crazy. We look at that now and we say that's crazy. We're like, why would you do that? But that's Jason of 2010, whatever that, Jason of 2000, and so yes, these things happen. Yes, these moments took place. Yes, these were frustrations, resentful, negative outcomes that erupted and caused these feelings of shame, caused these feelings of growth, caused these moments and these, I would challenge younger Jason to look at it as a spark of divinity where, yes, these moments happened, and yes, these are the event crisis points, but these are also moments where we've chosen to carve a new path, where we've also chosen to vow that, yes, this happened, but we're going to move through it, we're going to move past it, we're going to choose a different outcome for ourselves. And we start once I make that decision, I put the line in the sand, and I now have a higher standard. I'm now choosing a better life for me, for those around me, for the ones that I include in my life, for you, my community. And this is where it starts from, yes, those moments happened, but it's not avoiding them. The moment you avoid things, it's like that car that approaches the cliff, or you walking up to the cliff. You start feeling anxiety. If I avoid it, then I'm not going to deal with it. The challenge with avoiding it and just putting it off by just stuffing my emotions and putting it away, what's going to happen is eventually those emotions are going to erupt. Eventually everywhere is going to be a cliff. Eventually everywhere is going to be frightening and triggering. We've talked about triggers before, and maybe that's a topic we can get into soon, because we keep bringing it up. But if we see everywhere as cliffs, if everything is a trigger, is that the problem of how I'm perceiving the world? Is that, we've talked before about shifting our perception of our emotions. And yes, those emotions happen, but is there another reason behind it? Is there another meaning that I can associate to it? And when it comes to feeling of shame, when it comes to the Jason who felt shame in the heat of my addiction, at the height of like my lowest low, what shame meant to me then is not the same feeling that shame sparks in me now. The spark of shame that I have today causes me to look at things in a different way, and thanks to having a solid foundation, thanks to having all these checks and balances in place, the supportive community, you, my community, my support groups, my counselor, these are all amazing A team players, I want to call them, where there's a sense of accountability that extends beyond my ego, beyond my physicalness, beyond, I almost want to call it spirit, but there's more to life than just my experience. And if there's something outside of it, then I'm free to choose it. Like I can move on outside of that, and I'm not going to let those limiting beliefs ruin my experience. Yes, they happen, but I'm not gonna keep reliving the past. Reliving the past doesn't help me. Yes, you can learn from it, but there's a certain context that you can grow, but there's a point where it's unhealthy. This has taken years for me to get to this point where I'm now at a state where, yes, these happen. Yes, I can move on. But yes, I'm also a better person because of these things. I'm a better person because I recognize those inequities and those fallacies. But I'm not able to do that if I'm not willing to go into that shadow area, that dark area. And what I mean by that is, in my addiction, I became really good at shining a light. And the light I would shine would be over here. And the light over here would be really, really good. So if anybody looked over here, this is the really, really good part, but I wouldn't shine the light over here in the dark area. And that dark area, that shadow area, that's where things where I wouldn't talk about. That's things where I would just avoid. And as soon as that existed, I started stuffing more things into that dark area. And so in recovery, in the 12 steps, in getting support, in being held accountable, one of the challenges we face is to go into that dark area and do the work. Start doing some shadow work. Start shining some lights over into it. Maybe not shine the lights right away from the whole thing, but if you can shine the light 2% more, at least there's a little bit less of a skeletons in the closet, if you know what I mean, where there's a point where we're able to move on and move through despite being held back by these feelings of anxiety, by these feelings of frustration or shame. I don't know if this relates to you. I don't know if this is something that speaks with you. This idea of shame came up in a conversation I was having, and I thought I wanted to share with you, and I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are on shame. What are your feelings on it? Am I out to lunch with these perceptions? I'm really interested in your thoughts. But I'm having a lot of fun with this show, and I'm really enjoying it, and I hope you are too. I want to show you something before we wrap up. I was working on, hold on. If you are watching, I've got an audio version of this captioned into a podcast, and that's what I have here on the link down below. The link is sobriety.live/now. If you go to that link, or if you're listening to the podcast right now, you can go to the link, and here I have, it's just a one pager, something simple, quick, and easy, where it's got the Outstanding Life podcast. Here I've got how to get a hold of me in case you're on Facebook, or if you want to watch the videos, I've got them on Facebook and YouTube. And then if you're a reader and you enjoy the blogs, I've got the transcriptions of the videos saved as a blog. A couple other resources here are free Coursera courses. These are really neat because they're free until the end of the year. And some of them are mental health related, and it's totally free. It's really awesome. I highly encourage you to check it out if that's something you're interested in. And then I've also got some of my most popular videos, like reaching out for help or how I became an addict. These are all videos that are housed on YouTube. Again, if it's something you're interested in, I highly encourage you to check it out. In the meantime, friends, my name is Jason. This is the Outstanding Life Show. This is all about you, my community, and I want to know more about what your thoughts are. Today's topic was on shame, and we went into a bit deeply with the personal experience. I hope you don't mind. But let me know what your thoughts are. I look forward to seeing you, and I hope that you join me either in another podcast or another video. But you take care and you have fun. Bye.